Of all the legendary rock supergroups out there, not one has gone through as many changes in personnel and style as Fleetwood Mac. Over the course of 50 years, the band has gone through 10 guitar players, 4 incarnations, and a roller coaster of highs and lows. However, they still remain relevant to this day, gaining more and more fans each time someone hears Dreams or Go Your Own Way. In this series, we will delve into the history, the music, and the legend that is Fleetwood Mac. This is The Chain, the evolution of Fleetwood Mac. Hello and welcome to The Chain, the evolution of Fleetwood Mac. I'm your host, Sean Stewart, alongside my partner, Jeff Coast. Well, thank you for joining us for this special podcast series on our journey through time as we delve into the music and the eras of Fleetwood Mac, starting with the first era, which is the Peter Green era and the start of Fleetwood Mac.
Well, hey everybody, hope you're going to enjoy this podcast. The beginnings of Fleetwood Mac actually starts in the British blues outbreak of the 1960s. That pretty much dominated the music scene in that time between the Beatles and the Stones. And one of the leading groups of the blues era was John Mayall's Blues Breakers. Now, that band has been well known to actually to have started the career of Eric Clapton, but it also had a hand in creating Fleetwood Mac as well. Bass player John McVie joined the Blues Breakers in 1963, and at that time, Eric Clapton was their lead guitar player. When Clapton went solo in 1966 to form Cream, he was replaced by guitarist Peter Green, who actually begged John Mayall to give him a chance, saying, you know, I could really ask in this band. I'm actually better than any guitar player that you see up there. And Mayall decided to give him a chance, and Green really proved himself. In 1967, drummer Mick Fleetwood was added to the group, but he was fired shortly afterward because he had a really heavy alcohol dependency, and Mayall just couldn't handle him anymore and let him go. But during his short time in the Blues Breakers, he became great friends with Peter Green and John McVie. And the three of them were actually heavily inspired by the success of the Yardbirds and Cream. And so Peter Green decided to break away from the Blues Breakers and form his own group. And he hired Mick Fleetwood right away to play drums, and he really wanted John McVie to play bass, but McVie was still under contract to Mayall, and he could not get out of it. So they hired a temporary bassist named Bob Bruning to play in his new band. But once John McVie was free up from Mayall, Bruning was let go, and McVie was hired. And Peter Green decided to call this new group Fleetwood Mac and named it after Fleetwood and McVie. They also added 2 more guitar players to this new band. Slide guitarist Jeremy Spencer was added in 1967, and Danny Kirwin was added in 1968. The band pretty much found really good success from the get-go. They had a lot of popular hits with the UK. 3 of them were Oh Well, Albatross, and Black Magic Woman, which actually was made famous by the band Santana in 1969 at Woodstock, which actually up to me ever discovering Fleetwood Mac, I had no idea that was their song.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, Jeff. I had no idea that Santana's Black Magic Woman was actually a Fleetwood Mac song. And most of you out there have probably heard this song if you've played any sort of Guitar Hero game. It is, I believe, on the 3rd installment of Guitar Hero, and I gotta say, it's a great song.
Oh, it is actually. In fact, Guitar Hero 3 actually is my favorite of all of them. I gotta be honest. That was the one I played the most, so I do like that one. But yeah, when I first heard Black Magic Woman, I always thought that was a Santana song. I heard it was Fleetwood Mac. I just couldn't believe it.
It's so perfect for the way Santana can play his guitar. It really showcases his ability.
Oh, I agree with that totally, and I think the fact that they debuted that song at Woodstock, I just think that's pretty dang awesome. Now, Peter Green was really well known for his guitar style, and it's very distinctive. When you hear it, you know it's Peter Green. And he was well known for using vibrato and string bending on his guitar playing. And 2 of the Fleetwood Mac songs from his era that demonstrate this perfectly are Oh Well and Albatross. And we'll play a sample of both of those for you to kind of give you an idea of Peter Green's style. This era of Fleetwood Mac is more reliant on rhythm and blues rather than lyrical content, but Albatross is a really great song. It's an instrumentals track, and it's just a really great song. And Oh Well is a really nice blues song to kind of get going. So we'll play those for you, and then we'll discuss them a little bit.
Well, we hope you enjoyed our little music break, and we hope that you picked out some of the vibrato and string bending, as well as some slide guitar in Albatross. And Jeff, I know you play guitar, so why don't you tell us a little bit about what goes into vibrato and string bending while you play?
Well, Sean, it's a really unique skill to have. I myself do not really have that skill. I have tried. You got to be good at string bending because it comes down to the gauge of strings you use and your style. Because if you use like a really heavy gauge guitar string, note bending is going to be really painful and hard to do. If you use a light gauge, too light of a gauge string, you're going to break it. But the lighter gauge strings you have, they're great because the strings will move up or back, and you have to have a really good technique of where you want to do with it and how long you want to hold that note duration. And also comes with the same thing with the couple of strings you want to use. Slide guitar is another skill, and for those of you who don't know what a slide guitar is, it's actually just either a little cylindrical bar that you wear on one of your fingers, either made of steel, glass, and I think there's also a couple of plastic ones too. And you just use it and slide up the guitar neck. And it's basically the same thing like vibrato, really. You're just using a bar to slide. A type of music that really uses this a lot is blues and also country. If you've ever seen a steel guitar, those guys all use slides. A slide guitar is a really unique skill to have. I myself have tried that, and I'm not good at that either. I'm more of a rhythm player, to be honest. But the thing about, if you hear that, and these songs have a really great just example of what it is, and how this era of Fleetwood Mac was really cool because although they had 3 guitar players, each guitar player had a part in doing leads. Like, not one would do the lead and 2 would do rhythm. Peter Green would do some string bending. Danny Kirwin would take over, do some rhythm and then some lead, and then Jeremy Spencer would do a lot of slide guitars. And you hear the mix of sound there; it just really adds to what they had as this group, and they were really, really good. They really were. And it's kind of a shame that they didn't get as much attention as they did in the U.S. in this era because they were kind of virtually unknown at the time. But and actually B.B. King, who's a major influence on Peter Green, actually stated that Peter Green was the only one that could give him the cold sweats, and the reason why he said that was because of basically by what you just heard in Albatross. By the way, he could play a guitar and play the notes. He was just an incredible guitar player. And
speaking for myself, that's definitely a song that I can just sit back on a nice warm summer day in a hammock and just listen to all day.
I know, yeah, because I felt the same way. It's like, I really like this song. There's no lyrics, but it's just a really sweet, relaxing song. It's great to be, like Sean said, sitting in a hammock or just driving to. It's just a really great song.
And was this something that was kind of new at the time with adding the slide guitaring and the different techniques that went into these songs?
Yeah, for mainstream music in the late 60s, a lot of rock bands didn't really have a lot of this. Blues bands did. And, of course, this is a blues band era for Fleetwood Mac, so you would expect it. But to be done in the style that they did it was something that was not totally common. I believe Eric Clapton did do some of that with Cream, but the way that Fleetwood Mac did it was just something original, and it's unique to their sound. If you know the Peter Green era Fleetwood Mac, this is something that you just expect.
Well, we hope you enjoyed listening to our musical samples of Oh Well and Albatross, and both of those songs very, very popular in the UK. Not so much in the US at this time, but Albatross actually going to number 1 in the UK. But it didn't really seem to matter that Fleetwood Mac was having this much success, as one of their main entities of the group, Peter Green, decided that the pressure was just a little bit too much and unfortunately took to drugs. And Jeff, sometimes LSD and music goes well together, sometimes it does not.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Sean. Most of the time it doesn't. Peter Green started to take LSD. In fact, the whole band was taking it when they were touring the United States, and I think it was 1969, and they opened for the Grateful Dead, and that's who introduced them to LSD. But Peter Green really took to that drug more than the rest of the band. In fact, it actually ended up being his downfall, and it ended up ruining his career. What happened was when the band was on tour in Munich, Germany in 1970, both Peter Green and Jeremy Spencer went to a party that was hosted by a commune, and there they both took multiple tabs of LSD, but Peter Green had taken one too many, and he ended up suffering a very severe mental breakdown that would end up changing his personality and his focus, and it really messed him up. In fact, he's actually still affected by that to this very day. his addiction became a really severe problem, and he had really trouble battling it. And because of his bad LSD trip, he actually kept having really horrible nightmares. And one of them he ended up waking up from, and he ended up writing a song about the very dream that he had that he couldn't escape. And it's called the Green Manalishi with the Two-Pronged Crown. And what do you think that means, Sean, with the two-pronged crown? What do you think that might be a reference to?
It would have had to have been something that he might have seen when he was on one of these crazy LSD trips. And we're gonna take a minute and take a listen to see what Peter Green was seeing or thinking while he wrote this song. Let's take a listen. Well, that was definitely interesting. And just listen to these lyrics if you didn't catch what was said. Come sneaking around, trying to drive me mad, busting in on my dreams, making me see things I don't want to see. Definitely a reference or an insight into the LSD warped mind of Peter Green.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I remember reading some things about this. I believe the Green Manalishi is a reference to, I believe, the devil. I believe he saw the devil in some of these trips. And it's really a song about him just crying out for help. You know, he's not liking this. He hates it. And LSD is like just taking his mind and his life and just turning it into a living nightmare. And he's basically like a helpless person just trapped.
But I will say this, even through the angst and the craziness that is going on maybe in his mind, what's coming out through his instrument is actually kind of impressive.
It is. In fact, if you look at the way, although the song is very dark lyrically and talking about a very severe problem, but if you look at the song in general, the guitar is great. It's got a little bit of a rock edge, but it's got the real nice blues licks. He's got a couple effects on his vocals, and it's a very, really well thought out, well recorded song.
The production value is just incredible, and to think that LSD was what brought this song to life, it's pretty unfathomable to think about that LSD was behind the makings of this song.
Yeah, because you can definitely hear it. The song has a psychedelic sound to it, although that was also popular at the time, but if you break this song down into its really well-written lyrics, to its riff, to the sort of wailing vocals he has echoed in the background, and parts of his vocals are actually echoed, so it can add to the effect, even I guess you could say a ghostly effect, and the guitar sounds all together. It really shows, Peter Green's just like put it all out there. He's basically wrote to music what he experienced in his nightmare, and in his LSD trip he's been going through.
And well, lucky for us, Peter Green's mind was still intact while he wrote the Green Manalishi. However, his mental condition would worsen, and he began to lose focus, and unfortunately it struggled to keep him kind of involved with the band, and it didn't matter that they were, number one in the UK at the time. It just, he didn't get his act together.
Yeah, that's right, Sean. As his mental condition started to worsen, he began to suggest a lot of crazy things. He decided to tell the band that they should actually give away all their money, all their earnings to charity, and just basically live for the basic essentials, and just give away everything they ever made on tours and albums to give to charity. And the rest of the band did not agree with that at all. They just could not go along with that. And even Peter Green realized that, you know what, I need help. I'm not me. I need to get away from this band. I got to get out. And he quit Fleetwood Mac. And his last performance with the band was on May 20th, 1970. And right after he left Fleetwood Mac, he pretty much just kind of disappeared from the music scene and the public. He wasn't really seen much after that. He only made 2 more albums in the 1970s that they didn't really get a whole lot of attention. And he also played an uncredited performance on Fleetwood Mac's Tusk album in 1979. But, after he left the band, they had to replace their leader, the guy who started everything. And instead of bringing somebody else in to replace him, Jeremy Spencer decided to say, okay, you know what, I'll step up. I'll be the leader of this band. But they still needed another musician to replace Peter Green. They didn't get another guitar player. They actually ended up bringing a keyboard player. And their solution to the problem was a young girl named Christine Perfect. It's a pretty interesting name, by the way.
It was a perfect solution to the perfect problem.
That's exactly right. She had some minor success with a band called Chicken Shack, which is a blues band. And she was a good vocalist, and she was a phenomenal piano player. And she had performed with Fleetwood Mac on one of their albums, Then Play On, which was released in 1969 while Peter Green was still leading the band. But she could not fully join them because she, again, like John McVie, she was under contractual obligations to Chicken Shack. But she was able to become a full-time member in 1971. But by the time she joined the band, she had already married the bassist, John McVie. Their relationship was pretty interesting. They met around the time when the band was recording Then Play On, and after seeing each other and dating for all of 10 days, they got married.
A whole whopping 10 days.
Yeah, I thought that was really pretty funny. That's just amazing to me. But
well, sometimes I guess when you know, you know.
Yeah, I guess so.
And 10 days for some is enough, or at least for Christine Perfect and John McVie, that is.
Yeah, I guess John must have been pretty persuasive when they were dating, because she married him in 10 days. That's pretty awesome. In 1970, they released their first post-Peter Green album, which was called Kiln House, and that was named after a house that the band lived in while they were recording that album. The album style was different from Peter Green, because now with the band's new leader, Jeremy Spencer, the album was more rock and folk rock oriented. Now, this was a departure from their blues roots, but they still, at the core, were a blues band. Jeremy Spencer, the material he wrote for this album was more of a homage to the 1950s rock and roll era, but they were more parodies than anything else. He kind of made fun of a couple of the style of the songs of the 50s. Danny Kirwin, however, was a bit more sincere and serious material. He wrote a song called Station Man, Earl Grey. That's a funny song. And Buddy's song, which actually was credited to Buddy Holly's mother, which Buddy Holly, if some of you don't know who Buddy Holly is, he was one of the most influential early rock and roll guitar players and songwriters. The song is credited to his mother, and it was written to the tune of Peggy Sue Got Married, with different lyrics, and it actually makes references to a lot of Buddy Holly's songs. Jeremy Spencer, which we had mentioned before, had taken LSD with Peter Green in Munich, and he was beginning to show signs of mental instability within himself. And he actually did not want to tour the United States whatsoever. He was afraid of going because he thought if they went to the United States, something bad was going to happen and they were all going to die or something. He really did think that. He was petrified. But Mick Fleetwood said, we got to tour, we got to do this, so he did go with the band in 1971 on the tour. When they got there, Jeremy Spencer left his hotel room, and he said to Mick Fleetwood that he was going to be going to a bookstore just to check something out. But he never came back. And this is a problem because they had a show that night, and he did not come back, so they had to cancel the show, and the whole band went out through Los Angeles looking for him. And they ended up finding him a couple days later. But he was no longer the Jeremy Spencer that left the hotel room. He actually had joined a cult called the Children of God. He felt he needed to get religiously safe because he felt he was really in a bad place in his life. But he had become a completely different person. He had shaved his head, his beard was gone, and he also went by a different name. He no longer wanted to be a part of Fleetwood Mac. He said, I'm done. I got to get out of here. And at the time, he did felt that the change in direction was something that he needed, but he also insisted that he was not brought into the cult by brainwashing. He joined because he wanted to. In fact, he's actually still involved with them to this day. Later on, though, Jeremy Spencer has been quoted to say that he actually left the band in the wrong way, and he should have told them that he wanted to quit, but at the time he was very desperate, and he felt he had no other choice.
Well, I guess when you're under the influence of some pretty psychedelic drugs, your mindset isn't exactly where it needs to be. And if that is indeed the case when they came to America and he was under the influence of LSD or whatever other drugs may have you, your mindset is going to be, I like what this person's saying. That's kind of what cults are. You get brainwashed as it is by the leader, and if he's under the influence of drugs, his mind isn't exactly where it needs to be to say, I should probably tell them I don't want to be in this band rather than just up and leaving.
Right, yeah. He was not really thinking when he left Fleetwood Mac, and he actually regrets that later on. And even it's a shame, though, he left because, once again, Jeremy Spencer put this band that was already on fragile ground into a very difficult position. So once he left, the band had to go on without him because they had a tour to complete. So they did call Peter Green. He came out of retirement to fill in on the tour. But once that tour was over, he was gone again, and he was done with that band. And so now here's Fleetwood Mac in 1971. Had success with Peter Green, lost Peter Green. Jeremy Spencer came in. Looks like things might turn out okay. They have Christine McVie now in the band. But then Jeremy Spencer leaves, and they're stuck again with a problem, and the future looks pretty shaky. So they quickly decide to retreat back to their kiln house where they were living at the time in the UK, and they began to search for another guitar player. And their solution was actually found, believe it or not, of all places, in Paris.
That's right, Jeff. They did find their replacement in Paris, and on our next podcast, we will discuss Bob Welch's introduction to the band, Danny Kirwin's explosive exit, and a scandal known as the fake Fleetwood Mac. We'll see you next time on The Chain, the evolution of Fleetwood Mac.